Show you different ways to conserve RAM to make using After Effects much more efficient. The first thing is to clear your desktop of all files. The files on your desktop use RAM as they sit there. And the more files you have, the larger the files you have, the more RAM you're using, and will be unable to use not just in After Effects but any other program. So the best thing to do is clear your desktop. And that does not mean simply making a folder and dragging here some loose files into that folder, because this folder is still on the desktop and all this information is still using RAM. What we need to do is get it off the desktop but still keep it accessible. So what I've done is create this what's called a desktop alias, and if I open that up, this is all the files one might have on their desktop, but it doesn't live on the desktop. It actually lives on my hard drive. In my case, in security, but you can put it anywhere on your hard drive. It really doesn't matter. So what you're going to do is you're going to create a new folder, and you're going to call this folder, I'm calling it desktop, so we'll call it desktop. Oh, I already have a name there, desktop, so we'll just call it desktop test. Desktop test. So anything I place in here is like any other folder. So if I were to open this up and I would place this file in my desktop test, there it is. If I right click or control click, I can create what's called an alias, make alias. This alias will contain everything in that desktop folder alias. So if I drag something right to my desktop here, desktop test here, it will appear in my desktop alias. There's those both files. Once you create this, you can take your desktop alias, drag it to your desktop. If I open it here, you'll see those files are still there, still accessible, but they don't live on the desktop. They live in this folder, which has this black arrow indicating that it's an alias to another folder. So moving forward, I can just, if I have something on my desktop like this right here, and I drag it to my alias, not only is it in the alias, it's also sent back to the my hard drive. So right now, everything here is not using RAM. This is my main hard drive. These are all my backups. This is my desktop alias. This is another alias I created for other information. And this is the alias I created for this demo. So right now I'm not using any extra RAM on my desktop, yet I have access to all these files. So that's the first thing you want to do. There are two things you can do in After Effects which will help when you run out of memory. Both of them can be found under Preferences. The first one is Media and Disk Cache. Basically what this does is every time you do a preview in After Effects, it's kind of slow, and usually the second and third time through it's much faster. That's because your animation is being cached. This also uses memory. So a couple things you can do is right now my maximum disk cache is at 500 gigabytes. I believe that's default. I would leave that there. But I'm going to empty my cache, and I'm going to go to the next one, the media cache, and I'm going to clean database and cache. And this is also going to free up some memory in After Effects. When I'm done with this, I'm going to go to memory, and here you have a choice of how much memory you want to dedicate for what program. So I have 32 gigs on my machine. I'm dedicating 26 of them to After Effects, leaving 6 for everything else. What this means is that I normally would quit out of almost all of my programs to use After Effects. Now, because I have 32 gigs of RAM, I'm able to run a few more programs. But if your machine has 8 or 16 gigabytes, you might want to dedicate, if it's 8, I might dedicate 6 to After Effects, and then you would absolutely have to close all of your other programs. If you have 16, I might allocate 10 or 12 to After Effects, and the rest for your computer. And again, it's probably a really good idea not to have other software open. So that's really a big help, and that's really going to increase your availability in RAM in After Effects. And they're the